Angela's story began in a little restaurant that stood on the corner of a busy downtown street. The air there always smelled of fried food, and the sound of plates clinking mixed with the chatter of customers filled every evening. Angela worked there almost every day, carrying trays heavier than her small frame seemed built for. She had learned to smile at rude customers, stay calm when orders went wrong, and move quickly enough to keep the manager from raising his eyebrows at her. Life wasn't easy, but she had to keep going. She wasn't working for herself alone. Back home, her mother was not well, and her younger brother still went to school. The rent had to be paid, electricity had to stay on, and food had to be on the table. Angela often told herself that this job, though tiring, was the rope that held her family together. Every tip meant a book for her brother, or medicine for her mother. That was enough reason to keep wearing the apron, no matter how hard the days felt. On one chilly evening, the restaurant was full. The windows were fogged from the warmth inside, and the line at the door stretched out to the street. Angela rushed between tables, balancing a tray with drinks, when she noticed a man sitting by himself near the corner. He looked simple, wearing plain jeans and a shirt, blending in so well that no one gave him a second look. But Angela noticed something about him. His face was pale, and he kept pressing his hand to his chest as if something wasn't right. At first, she thought maybe he was just tired or stressed. People came into the restaurant after long days at work, and sometimes they looked just like that. But then, as she set down a glass of water for another customer, she heard the sound of a chair scraping suddenly. The man had collapsed forward, his body shaking as his drink spilled across the table. For a brief moment, everything in the restaurant froze. Customers stared, forks hanging in midair. The other waiters looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Angela didn't think twice. She rushed over, kneeling beside the man, calling out to him. "Sir, are you okay? Can you hear me?" Her voice was calm but urgent. No one else moved. Some whispered about calling the manager first. Others just kept watching. Angela grabbed a glass of water and held it to his lips, but he couldn't drink. She quickly waved to the cashier. "Call an ambulance now," she ordered. Her hands trembled, but she held his arm steady, checking if he was still breathing properly. The man slowly opened his eyes, his voice weak. "Thank you," he whispered, almost too soft to hear. Angela kept reassuring him, telling him that help was on the way, that he wasn't alone. She didn't care that her tables were left waiting, that the manager was glaring at her from across the room. In that moment, this man's life mattered more than anything else. When the paramedics arrived, Angela helped them lift him gently onto the stretcher. The man squeezed her hand before they carried him away, his eyes filled with gratitude. Angela stood there, her apron wet from spilled drinks, her heart still racing, but she felt she had done the right thing. But not everyone thought so. The manager, a tall man with a sharp face, walked over to her, his voice low but harsh. "Angela, what do you think you're doing? You left customers waiting. You caused a scene. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" Angela stared at him in disbelief. He was in trouble. He could have. She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "I just helped him. Isn't that more important than serving a plate of fries?" The manager's eyes narrowed. "Not in this restaurant. You don't make the rules here." Then he turned on his heel and walked back to the kitchen. Angela stood frozen for a moment, feeling the stares of the customers fade as they returned to their meals. Her co-workers avoided her eyes, as if helping someone had become a crime. She forced herself to keep working until her shift was over, but the whole time her heart felt heavy. That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, Angela replayed the scene again and again in her. The next morning, Angela woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest. The sun was peeking through the thin curtains of her small apartment, but instead of warmth, she felt a strange chill. She remembered the way the manager had looked at her last night, sharp and angry, like she had done something unforgivable. She brushed the thought aside, hoping it was only his temper and that today things would be normal again. Angela quickly got ready for work. Her mother asked softly from the kitchen, "Are you all right, dear?" Angela forced a smile and nodded. "I'm fine, Mama. Just tired from the long night." She didn't want her mother to worry. She packed a sandwich for her younger brother's lunch and left the apartment, walking down the cracked sidewalk with her apron folded under her arm. At the restaurant, she noticed something was different. The staff weren't smiling at her the way they usually did. Some avoided her, whispering behind her back. She told herself not to overthink, but her stomach tightened as the manager called her name. "Angela, in my office. Now." She followed him inside. The office was small, with faded walls and a single desk covered with papers. He didn't ask her to sit. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking at her with a cold expression. "Angela," he began, "we need to talk about your behavior last night." Angela stood still, her palms sweating. "If this is about the man who collapsed," he cut her off. "Yes, it is about that. You left your section unattended. You embarrassed this restaurant. Do you realize how many customers complained? Some said they felt ignored because you were busy playing nurse." Angela's mouth dropped open. "Playing nurse?" He fainted. He could have been dying. "I only tried to help." The manager slammed a paper on the desk. "This is not a hospital. We are here to serve food, not play heroes. You disrupted service, and I cannot allow that." Angela's voice trembled, but she refused to step back. "If helping someone in need is wrong, then maybe I'm in the wrong place. But I will never regret what I did." The manager's eyes narrowed further. "Good. Then you don't belong here. You're fired." The words hit her harder than she expected. Fired? Just like that. She had given months of hard work, long hours, even covered shifts when others didn't show up. And now, because she chose to help a man, her job was gone. She felt her throat tighten. "Please, sir. I need this job. My family depends on it. I can't just..." But the manager raised his hand. "The decision is final. You can collect your last paycheck from the cashier. Now leave my office." Angela felt her knees weaken. She turned and walked out, her face burning with shame and anger. A few co-workers peeked at her from the kitchen door, but no one spoke. Some looked guilty, but not one of them stood up for her. She collected the envelope with her final pay, the amount far smaller than the pile of bills waiting at home. She slipped it into her bag and walked out of the restaurant, not looking back. The cold air outside stung her cheeks as tears finally spilled down. As she walked home, every step felt heavier. How was she going to tell her mother? How would she pay rent this month? And what about her brother's school fees? She had fought so hard to keep everything together, and in one morning it all came crashing down. When she entered the apartment, her mother was sitting at the table, folding clothes. She looked up and saw Angela's face. "What happened?" Angela sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping. "Mama, they fired me." Her mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "For what? You did nothing wrong." Angela tried to stay strong, but her voice cracked. "They said I embarrassed the restaurant by helping that man. They didn't care that he was sick. They only cared about their customers' plates." Her mother shook her head slowly, sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes the world is unfair, child. But you must not lose hope. You did the right thing, and that is what matters." Angela buried her face in her hands. "But how will we pay the bills now? What if we lose this place?" Her mother reached across the table and held her hand. We will manage. We always do. And remember, when one door closes, another one opens. You may not see it yet, but something better is waiting for you. Angela wanted to believe those words, but fear sat like a stone in her chest. That evening, she tried to search for jobs on her old laptop. She sent out applications to diners, coffee shops, and stores, but with so many people looking for work, she knew it wouldn't be easy. Her younger brother came in, holding his school books. "Angela, are you okay?" he asked softly. She smiled at him, though her eyes were red. "I'm okay, little one. Don't worry about me. Just focus on your studies." But deep inside, she wasn't okay. She lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling of the apartment, replaying every moment in her head. She wondered if she should have stayed quiet, if she should have just walked past the man like everyone else did. But then she remembered his weak voice whispering thank you, and she knew she had made the right choice. Even if it had cost her everything. What Angela didn't know was that far across town, in a quiet hospital room, the man she had helped was opening his eyes. And his first thought was not of his own health, but of the waitress who had stayed by his side when no one else would. In a quiet hospital room across town, the man Angela had helped opened his eyes slowly. His head felt heavy, but his mind was clear enough to remember what had happened the night before. He recalled sitting in the restaurant, the sudden wave of dizziness, and then the moment everything went black. The last thing he remembered before waking up was a young woman kneeling beside him, holding his hand, speaking softly so that he would not feel alone. The man's name was Mr. Harrison. Most people in the city knew his name from newspapers and television, but in the restaurant that evening, no one had recognized him. He was a millionaire, the owner of several companies, but he disliked showing off his wealth. He often dressed in simple clothes when going out alone. To him, money was just a tool, not something to brag about. As he lay in the hospital bed, his personal assistant, Daniel, entered the room carrying a folder. "Sir, how are you feeling?" he asked, placing the folder on the table beside the bed. "A little weak," Mr. Harrison admitted, "but better than yesterday." He paused and looked at Daniel. "Tell me, who was that young woman at the restaurant?" "The one who helped me." Daniel frowned. "The waitress, sir. I only saw her for a moment when the paramedics arrived." "Yes," Harrison said, his voice thoughtful. "She was the only one who came to my side. She stayed with me until help came. If not for her quick actions, things could have been worse." Daniel nodded. "Would you like me to find her?" Harrison's eyes softened. "Yes. I need to thank her. People like that, they are rare. She didn't know who I was. She helped me because it was the right thing to do." Later that afternoon, once the doctors confirmed he was stable, Harrison asked his driver to take him back to the restaurant. He walked inside, still pale but determined. The staff froze when they saw him, suddenly realizing who he was. The manager, who had been barking orders at the waiters, rushed over with a forced smile. "Mr. Harrison. What an honor to have you here. I didn't know you were one of our guests last night." Harrison's eyes were sharp. "Where is the young woman who helped me?" The manager's smile faltered. "Ah. Angela, you mean? She's no longer with us." "What do you mean?" Harrison asked firmly. The manager cleared his throat. "We had to let her go. She abandoned her tables, created a scene, and upset the customers. This is a professional place, Mr. Harrison. We can't have staff behaving that way." For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Harrison's face grew dark. "She saved my life," he said slowly, his voice low but heavy with anger. "And you fired her for it?" The manager shifted uncomfortably. I didn't realize you didn't realize because you were too busy worrying about your profits," Harrison cut him off. His voice carried across the room, and several diners turned to listen. Let me tell you something. A business that punishes compassion is a business built on weak foundations. The manager stammered, "Sir, please," but Harrison had already turned and walked out, leaving the manager red-faced and sweating in front of the stunned staff and customers. In the car, Harrison leaned back against the seat. "Find her, Daniel," he said quietly. "I don't care how long it takes. I need to see her." Back in her apartment, Angela was sitting at the small table, scrolling through job listings on her old laptop. The screen kept freezing, and half the ads she found were already expired. She sighed, pressing her hand to her forehead. Her brother sat across from her, doing his homework. She tried to keep her worries hidden, but her mother noticed. "Don't push yourself too hard, Angela. Something will come." Angela smiled faintly. "I know, Mama. I just wish I could believe it." The sound of a car pulling up outside made her look toward the window. It wasn't common for fancy cars to stop on their street. The black car gleamed under the streetlight, and when the door opened, a man in a suit stepped out. He walked up to their door and knocked firmly. Angela's heart skipped a beat. "Who could that be?" she whispered. She opened the door carefully, and her eyes widened in shock. Standing before her was Mr. Harrison himself, the very man she had helped. Angela's mouth opened, but no words came out. She recognized him now from the newspapers and TV interviews she had occasionally seen. But the night before, she had only seen a man in need, not a millionaire. "Miss Angela?" Harrison asked kindly. "May I come in?" Angela stammered, "Why yes, of course." She stepped aside, still stunned, as he entered the small apartment. Her mother quickly stood, surprised to see a stranger in a fine suit. Harrison smiled politely at her family before turning back to Angela. "I owe you my life," he said softly. "You didn't know me, yet you were the only one who helped. That kind of courage and kindness, it cannot be forgotten." Angela shook her head. "I only did what anyone should have done. You don't owe me anything." But Harrison's eyes were steady. "On the contrary, I owe you everything. And I was shocked to learn you lost your job because of what you did. That is unfair, and I intend to make it right." Angela's breath caught. "Make it right? How?" Harrison smiled gently. "You'll see." Angela stood frozen, staring at Mr. Harrison as if she were dreaming. The words he had spoken still echoed in her mind. "I intend to make it right." No one had ever said anything like that to her. She was used to being overlooked, dismissed, or blamed for things that weren't her fault. And yet here was a man of wealth and power standing in her tiny apartment, speaking to her as though she mattered. Her mother, trying to be polite, offered him a seat. "Please, sir, have a chair," she said, moving a pile of folded laundry from one of the old wooden chairs. Harrison smiled warmly and sat, while Angela's younger brother peeked curiously from behind his school books, wide-eyed at the fancy visitor. "I didn't want to disturb your family," Harrison began, his voice calm but serious. "But I needed to come here in person. Last night, you saved me when no one else lifted a finger. That tells me a great deal about who you are. Kindness in this world is rare, and people like you deserve more than what life has given so far." Angela shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. She clasped her hands together, her fingers trembling slightly. "I only did what I thought was right," she murmured. "I didn't expect anything in return." Harrison leaned forward, studying her face. "And that is exactly why you deserve something in return." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple card with his name printed on it. "I want you to come work for me, Angela. Not as a waitress. As my personal assistant." Angela blinked in shock. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. "Your Personal assistant. Yes, Harrison said with a firm nod. I run several businesses, and I need someone I can trust by my side. It's not an easy role. It requires loyalty, quick thinking, and the ability to handle pressure. But after what I saw yesterday, I believe you have all those qualities and more. Angela's heart raced. She had never imagined such an opportunity could come her way. Just yesterday she had been fired, humiliated, and hopeless. And now, in the very same week, a millionaire was offering her a position in his own world. But, sir, she stammered, I don't have the kind of education or skills people in your office must have. I've only ever worked in restaurants. I don't even know if I'd be good enough. Harrison smiled gently. Skills can be taught. Degrees can be earned. But character cannot be bought. You showed courage when others stayed frozen. You showed compassion when others turned away. That is what I value most in the people who work with me. Angela's mother, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Angela, child, do you hear what this man is saying? This is the kind of chance people pray for. Don't doubt yourself. Angela looked at her mother's tired but hopeful face, then at her brother's shining eyes, and she felt a lump in her throat. She had always dreamed of a better life for her family but never thought the door would open this wide. Still, she hesitated. Why me, Mr. Harrison? Out of all the people you could hire, why me? Harrison's expression softened. Because when I was on that floor, I saw the truth of people. Most looked away. Some whispered. But you acted. You didn't see a stranger as a burden. You saw a human being in need. That is the kind of person I want by my side. I can teach business, but I cannot teach a heart like yours. Angela felt her eyes sting with tears, but this time they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of possibility. Slowly, she nodded. All right. I'll accept. A smile spread across Harrison's face. Good. I'll have Daniel, my assistant, contact you tomorrow with the details. We'll arrange transportation, training, and everything else you need. You won't have to worry about rent or bills anymore. You'll be earning a proper salary. Angela's mother clasped her hands together in gratitude. Sir, you have no idea what this means for our family. Harrison rose from the chair, adjusting his jacket. Actually, I do. I grew up with very little myself. I know what it feels like to fight every day just to survive. That's why I will never forget kindness, no matter where it comes from. Before he left, Harrison turned back to Angela. Tomorrow begins a new chapter for you. Don't be afraid. You belong in a bigger world than you've ever imagined. After he left, the family sat in stunned silence. Then Angela's brother suddenly leapt from his seat and hugged her tightly. You're going to work for a millionaire, Angela. You're going to change our lives. Angela laughed through her tears, hugging him back. Maybe we really are. That night, Angela could hardly sleep. Her mind was filled with questions. What would the job be like? Would she be able to handle it? Would she fit into such a world of wealth and power? But beneath all the fear was a growing flame of hope. For the first time in years, she felt like her life was moving towards something brighter. The next morning, a sleek car pulled up outside their apartment, just as Harrison had promised. Daniel stepped out, greeted Angela politely, and held the door open for her. She hugged her mother and brother tightly before climbing in, whispering, I'll make you proud. As the car moved through the city streets, Angela watched the buildings pass by, her heart pounding with anticipation. She was leaving behind the world of greasy trays and rude customers, stepping into a world she had only seen in dreams. By the time they reached the tall glass building that housed Harrison's main office, Angela felt both nervous and excited. She took a deep breath as she stepped inside, ready to begin the new journey that fate had opened for her. And though she did not yet know it, this was only the beginning of the biggest shock of her life. Angela stepped into the tall glass building with wide eyes, her heart racing as she looked around. The lobby alone felt like another world. Shiny marble floors stretched out beneath her feet, and the air smelled faintly of fresh flowers instead of fried food. People in suits walked briskly through the space, carrying folders, greeting each other politely. Angela felt out of place in her simple clothes, but Daniel, Mr. Harrison's assistant, gave her a reassuring nod. "This way, Miss Angela," he said kindly, leading her to the elevator. She held her small handbag tightly, feeling like she was about to take her first step onto a stage where everyone else already knew their lines. The elevator doors opened on the top floor, revealing a wide office with tall windows that looked out over the entire city. The view made Angela catch her breath. She had never been so high up before, never looked down on the city from such a height. For a moment, she forgot her nerves and simply stared in wonder. Mr. Harrison was already there, waiting for her behind a large but simple desk. He wasn't dressed in a heavy suit like the others in the building. Instead, he wore a light jacket and smiled warmly at her. "Angela, welcome. You're right on time." Angela managed a small smile. "Thank you for giving me this chance, sir. I hope I can do well." Harrison gestured toward a chair across from his desk. "Sit, please. Let me explain what this role means. Being my assistant doesn't just mean answering phones or carrying files. It means learning, growing, and being someone I can trust with important matters. You'll be exposed to meetings, decisions, and opportunities. I want you to think of this as more than a job. It's a doorway into a new life." Angela listened carefully, trying to absorb every word. She nodded, though she still felt unsure of herself. "I'll do my best," she said softly. Over the next days, Angela began to learn the rhythm of her new position. At first, it was overwhelming. There were schedules to organize, documents to review, and people with polished accents speaking in ways she struggled to follow. She worried about making mistakes, about embarrassing herself in front of important clients. But Harrison was patient with her. He didn't expect her to be perfect. Instead, he gave her space to learn, encouraged her when she felt uncertain, and reminded her that she had earned her place there. Slowly, Angela found her footing. She discovered she was good at keeping details in order, remembering names and faces, and sensing when Harrison needed support even before he asked. What surprised her most was how he treated her. He never spoke down to her, never made her feel small. Even though he was a millionaire and she had once been a waitress, he listened when she spoke and valued her opinions. That respect gave Angela courage, and day by day, she grew more confident. One afternoon, Harrison invited her to join him in a meeting with his board members. The room was filled with people in expensive suits, all speaking in serious tones about profits and projects. Angela sat quietly at the side, taking notes as best as she could. Halfway through, one board member made a suggestion that didn't sit right with her. She hesitated, then whispered her thoughts to Harrison. He listened, nodded, and then raised her point to the group. To her shock, everyone stopped to consider it. Some disagreed at first, but as they discussed further, they realized her idea actually solved a problem they hadn't thought about. Angela sat frozen, her cheeks burning, unable to believe that her simple observation had been taken seriously in such a room. Afterward, Harrison smiled at her. "See? You have instincts. Trust them." For Angela, that moment was like a spark. She began to realize she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Weeks turned into months, and her life transformed completely. She was earning more than enough to pay rent, buy her mother's medicine, and cover her brother's school fees. For the first time, there was even extra money left over. She bought her mother a new chair to rest in, got her brother better textbooks, and even surprised them one weekend by taking them out to a nice restaurant, one where she didn't have to serve but could finally sit as a guest. Word spread back in her old neighborhood, and people couldn't believe the change. The same Angela who had once carried trays in a corner diner was now working for one of the city's most respected men. Her story became one neighbors whispered about with awe, and even people who had once ignored her now greeted her with respect. Meanwhile, the restaurant that had fired her was not doing well. News of the incident with Mr. Harrison had quietly spread among customers, and the reputation of the manager sank. Customers began leaving bad reviews, complaining about how the staff lacked kindness. Slowly, business declined, while Angela's star only rose higher. But Angela never let success change her heart. She still took the bus sometimes, still greeted neighbors with the same warm smile, and still carried the lessons of struggle inside her. She knew what it meant to have nothing, and she promised herself she would always stay humble. One evening, Harrison called her into his office. He stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, and when he turned to her, his expression was serious but kind. "Angela, I want you to know something. You didn't just save my life that night. You reminded me of what truly matters. In my world, people chase money and power, but you reminded me that compassion is worth more than both. You've brought that spirit into my company, and it's making a difference." Angela felt her throat tighten with emotion. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded, her eyes shining. Harrison continued, "I see a future for you beyond this job. You have the potential to grow into a leader. And when the time comes, I'll help you step into that future." Angela left the office that night with her heart full. She thought of the girl she had been only months before, tired, afraid, carrying trays in a crowded restaurant. And she thought of the woman she was becoming, confident, valued, and hopeful. Her life had turned around in ways she never expected. All because one night, when everyone else turned away, she chose to help. Angela's story became a lesson to her family, her community, and eventually even herself. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can open the biggest door. And though the shock of that first offer had changed her life, she knew the greater surprise was still unfolding, the surprise of discovering her own strength and realizing she belonged in a world far bigger than she had ever dared to dream.